You won't believe it, but on its border with Russia, Estonia is now digging real anti-tank ditches, installing concrete dragon's teeth, and building hundreds of bunkers. The small Baltic country is effectively turning its eastern frontier into a defensive line, preparing for the worst-case scenario, a possible attack from Russia. After Moscow unleashed its full-scale war against Ukraine, Estonians have no illusions left. They remember how in 2014 Russia seized Crimea without a fight, and since 2022 has been methodically destroying Ukrainian cities. In Tallinn, they understand, for now, Russian aggression is being stopped in Ukraine. But if that changes, the Baltic states could easily become the next target. As former NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen noted, if Putin succeeds in Ukraine, he won't stop there. That's why Estonia is preparing for defense like never before, even though it sincerely hopes to avoid a direct attack. Not since the Cold War has Estonia seen fortifications of this scale on its eastern border. A joint Baltic Defense Line is now being created together with its neighbors, a system of fortifications stretching roughly 1,000 kilometers along the borders of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania with Russia and Belarus. It will include concrete bunkers, a sprawling network of trenches, and anti-vehicle barriers. In Estonia alone, about 600 reinforced concrete bunkers are planned on the eastern border in the coming years. These structures are designed to withstand direct hits from large-caliber artillery shells. Each fortified shelter will hold roughly a platoon of soldiers, about 10 people, and serve as a defensive strongpoint. In the forested border areas, deep anti-tank ditches are already being dug, 3 meters deep and 4 meters wide, intended to stop or at least sharply slow down enemy armored vehicles. The idea is that tanks trying to cross them would become easy targets for defenders' anti-tank weapons. Alongside these trenches, Estonia is placing concrete dragon's teeth pyramids capable of blocking armored columns. For now, all of this is set up as prepared infrastructure. In peacetime, Estonia does not mind the actual border or string barbed wire, but it keeps everything necessary close at hand, engineering munitions, barriers, and hedgehogs, ready to seal all gaps within hours if a threat arises. Tallinn is allocating unprecedented funds for the construction of this new defense line. Over the next 4 years, Estonia plans to invest about €500 million in developing military infrastructure along the border. The bunker network alone is estimated at €60 to €64 million. For a country of just 1.3 million people, these are enormous sums, but the priority of security is undeniable. Estonia has already become NATO's leader in terms of defense spending. This year, it is devoting around 5.4% of its GDP to defense, surpassing even the United States in this metric. By comparison, NATO allies only recently agreed to raise the minimum defense spending threshold to 2% and are now discussing a long-term goal of 5%. Estonians, however, are acting preemptively, having sharply increased their defense budget after Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Previously, Estonia consistently spent about 2% of GDP on defense, but the war next door changed everything. The fear of sharing Ukraine's fate has forced a dramatic acceleration of rearmament. The sense of threat in Estonia is especially acute because it has one of the longest land borders with Russia in the European Union, nearly 300 kilometers, second only to much larger Finland. On top of that, from the Estonian border to the Baltic Sea, there are less than 200 kilometers of open terrain. This means that in the event of an invasion, there would be no room for a deep retreat. The country could be cut in half in just a matter of days. For comparison, Ukraine has significant territorial depth, and yet some of its regions were still quickly occupied at the beginning of the invasion. Estonia, by contrast, is smaller than a single Ukrainian region in terms of land area, and its population is more than 100 times smaller than Russia's. Its armed forces consist of only a few thousand professional soldiers, with up to 43,000 troops available in the event of full mobilization, including reservists. That is a tiny force compared to Russia's hundreds of thousands of troops. Back in 2016, experts at RAND simulated a hypothetical invasion and reached a sobering conclusion. Without substantial Allied assistance, Russian tanks could reach the outskirts of Tallinn within 60 hours. Realistically assessing such a scenario, Estonians understand they would not be able to retake lost territory on their own, which is why it must never be given up in the first place. Previously, NATO's defense plans for the Baltics were based on the doctrine of elastic deterrence, using limited local forces to delay the enemy until the main alliance forces could arrive. In practice, this meant the Baltics were expected to act as a kind of hero city under siege, partially occupied at first, then later liberated by allies. Today, this strategy is being abandoned. At NATO summits in Madrid, 2022, and Vilnius, 2023, allies approved new defense plans focused on preventing any enemy breakthrough at all. Defend every inch of territory. That is now NATO's official approach. The fortifications currently being built on the Estonian-Russian border are designed precisely for this concept, to meet the aggressor at the frontier, tie down its forces from the outset, and buy time for reinforcements to arrive. Within Estonia itself, this decision enjoys broad support, from the military to ordinary civilians. Serious defense begins with serious preparation, as the Ministry of Defense put it when commenting on the works at the border. While officials acknowledge that there is no immediate threat of invasion, Estonians do not want to repeat Ukraine's fate of being caught off guard. The war has shown that Russia destroys everything it cannot hold, and that recovering lost territory later is extremely difficult and costly. In Bucha, we saw how Russians treated Ukrainians, their fellow Slavs. I don't even want to imagine what they would do to the Balts, whom they've always considered evil fascists, admitted Peter Koimet, a representative of the Estonian Ministry of Defense. Society is therefore determined to fight to the last, ensuring the enemy never sets foot on Estonian soil. Tellingly, in military exercises and defense planning, Estonians no longer ask if an attack happens, but rather say when it happens. This mentality of preparedness for the worst now prevails across all the Baltic states and Poland. Lithuania and Latvia, following Estonia's lead, are also strengthening their borders, reinstating conscription, and purchasing modern weapons. Poland has gone even further, launching an unprecedented expansion of its army to 300,000 to 500,000 troops and building its own eastern shield along the borders with Belarus and Ukraine's Politia region. Collectively, these measures are meant to send a clear signal to the Kremlin. The West will no longer be a helpless bystander, as it was during the annexation of Crimea in 2014. Estonia is paying special attention to its most vulnerable areas. One of them is the Narva direction. In the border city of Narva, many residents are Russian-speaking, and the Kremlin could theoretically try to use them for provocations or as a pretext for aggression, similar to its false claims of protecting Russian speakers in Ukraine. To prevent this, Estonia in recent years has been actively securing the rear, strengthening counterintelligence and cracking down on pro-Russian influence, limiting visa issuance to Russians, and banning holders of Russian passports from voting in local elections. The country has dismantled Soviet monuments, cut off Russian TV channels, and is transitioning school education entirely to the Estonian language. In Narva itself, a Soviet tank monument was removed last year, despite protests from part of the local population. And when, on May 9, 2023, Russians on the other side of the border set up a giant screen to broadcast propaganda, Estonia responded by deploying a permanent army unit in Narva. The first time troops have been permanently based there. A nearby base is expected to become fully operational by 2027, hosting several hundred Estonian and allied soldiers. These steps make clear that Estonia no longer tolerates gray zones even in symbolic matters. Every inch of its territory must be defended, if not by Estonian forces, then by NATO. The most important factor of deterrence, of course, is NATO itself. Since 2004, Estonia has been a member of the alliance, which means any Russian attack would automatically trigger war with the entire bloc. In practice, this has allowed Estonia's defense to be significantly strengthened. International NATO battalions have been deployed in Estonia and neighboring states as part of the Enhanced Forward Presence program, which began in 2017. In military planning, the so-called Suwałki border plays a key role, a narrow strip of land between Belarus and Kaliningrad, only about 65 kilometers wide, which connects the Baltics with Poland and further with the rest of Europe. If this corridor were to be cut off, land reinforcements to Estonia might not arrive in time. That is why the Baltic states want to be able to hold the line as long as possible on their own, at least until help arrives either by land or sea. To that end, they have coordinated their defense plans as a unified region, conducted joint exercises, and even developed mass evacuation plans for civilians in the event of a large-scale war. At the same time, efforts are underway to speed up the arrival of Allied reinforcements by restructuring military logistics, modernizing railways, once oriented more toward connections with Russia, building new ammunition depots, fuel bases, and repair centers. NATO has also significantly increased air patrols over the Baltics, and with neighboring Finland's accession to the alliance, Moscow now faces a continuous northern front stretching from the Arctic to the Black Sea. In this sense, Estonians joke that they now feel safer than at any time in the past several centuries. Because for the first time in history, they are protected not only by their small national army, but by the full power of collective defense. So today, what is being built on the border with Russia is not just a fence or a ditch. Estonia is erecting a shield, behind which stands NATO. This small country, with the bitter historical experience of Soviet occupation, is transforming into a forward outpost of the Western world. Bunkers, trenches, reservists, and missiles, all of it is meant to ensure that Estonian soil does not become easy prey for Putin. The Kremlin can already see, in the Baltics, it will not be received the way it was in Crimea. And even if the threat of invasion remains hypothetical, Estonians prefer to be prepared 100%.